And I want to first of all thank the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, for hosting this event on convergence of the poverty and environment nexus, unfinished business of the MDGs, evidence from the UNDP-UNEP Poverty-Environment Initiative. And it's really a great pleasure for me to be here with all of you and to see that the Poverty Environment Initiative has indeed flourished in the 5 or 6 years since it was established. And you know, if I think back, 6 years ago I was still a kid with a few dreams, and one of them was that it would be possible to approach development in such a way that we could effectively make a serious dent in reducing poverty and protecting vulnerable societies from falling into poverty and despair, while at the same time and by means of strengthening the ecosystems and the health of the environments that we all fundamentally depend on for our well-being, and that certainly poor people around the world in particular depend on for their well-being. At the time, there were a few other kids with a similar dream, and we had a small experiment. There were some pilot activities in very few countries that seemed promising, and we decided to go to our partners and suggest a way forward to see if we couldn't go to scale and work together in such a way to make a contribution to poverty reduction and environmental stewardship going together, make that more of a habit as opposed to the exception out there. And although we're still far away around the world from making that the habit, I still think we can say that with the expanded Poverty and Environment Initiative and the results of the last 6 years, we can see a way forward, because the examples you'll be hearing about here today and the many other examples captured in the annual report of this initiative and also captured in evaluations show that indeed this is possible and that societies can benefit enormously as a result. And we're also seeing what it takes to make it happen. And I will say a few words about this. I think we can all agree that this nexus of poverty and environment, although it's been on the agenda, something we've been talking about and working on certainly since Rio '92, if not before, this is something that's becoming more and more urgent as time goes by. Looking at the impacts of climate change and the degradation of ecosystems that we're seeing at a fascinating pace in too many places around the world, and how this affects millions of people as that happens. Rio Plus 20 years after the first Rio conference, highlighted even more strongly the need for integrated solutions and to put national institutions at the center of the action agenda for sustainable development and for addressing the poverty and environment linkages. And certainly we've come to understand more so today than before that this has to go beyond the ministries of environment. It has to include ministries of finance and planning. And if people and ministers in those kinds of ministries do not see the value of natural resources and recognize that sustainable development is as much about sustaining the environment as it is about sustaining growth and social development, then we won't make that transition. We won't make that change in how societies go about dealing with these trade-offs. They will forever be seen as trade-offs, and we will never get on with seeing potential for synergy. And PEI has shown that there is potential to take this poverty-environment nexus as a concept and to make it tangible for policymakers. It's an issue that, despite the skepticism from some, we have been able, working together over these years, to provide the kind of create the kind of space for dialogue and create the kind of joint work that spans both stakeholders in government as well as beyond and development partners, where policymakers, can wrestle with the challenges without it being seen as an academic exercise. And so we're talking about very practical ways of moving the poverty and environment agenda forward and with that sustainable development. And it's working through existing structures as opposed to trying to setting up new things all the time. What we are also learning is that change doesn't happen overnight. The actual transformational changes are much more often the result of patient work with governments and stakeholders in the national context in a clear lead. And it's over maybe 5 or 10 years that you see the big transformational results. It's not from 1 year to the next. So that also speaks to the importance of approaching this from a perspective of leveraging and nurturing the space for collaboration in government and beyond the government to bring about change, whether it's at the national level or it's in the interface between the national and local level, the interface between the public and the private sector, and so on. The secrets to success or significant progress lie much more in creating those kinds of fruitful collaborations than in the technical solutions, the smart policy designs per se. Now we're looking from, we're in a transition, as we all know. We keep talking about this in all sorts of meetings these days, from the framework of the Millennium Development Goals to a new framework that we call, for want of a better term, the post-2015 Development Agenda. And it's our hope that what we will be discussing here today and the contribution of the Poverty and Environment Initiative will in fact be a significant contribution to how we shape the agenda for the coming 15 or 20 years, whatever the case may be when it comes to development. Because we need that paradigm shift in terms of how institutions work. We need that paradigm shift in how natural resources are valued and managed. And I can't think of a better opportunity and a better context for bringing that about than in the elaboration of the next development framework. And therefore it's quite promising that the Rio outcome document set out to move that forward with the formulation of Sustainable Development Goals. It's very promising that the high-level panel on post-2015 squarely placed this intersection of poverty eradication and sustainable development at the center of the proposed agenda as the high-level panel sees it. So there's a lot of convergence in how people see these issues, and I will even go to the step of venturing that this initiative that we'll be talking about here today has made a small contribution to moving that that way of thinking forward, and that indeed it's possible. It's practically possible to make real progress in reducing poverty, as both Bangladesh and Rwanda demonstrated, while at the same time coming up with the kinds of policies and frameworks and developing the kinds of capacities at national and local levels that help minimize trade-offs and in fact move towards more triple win, as we call them, triple win dividends across the economic, the social, and the environmental realms. And that is indeed at the center of discussion right now on sustainable development goals and the post-2015 agenda. We also believe that this is a good example of the kinds of partnerships, strategic partnerships, within the UN system that we probably need more of going forward, not less, in terms of the very good collaboration between UNEP and UNDP. And we certainly remain fully committed to this, and we have embedded this in our thinking in the context of our commitments in the strategic plan for the coming 4 years, as well as the way we have formulated together with our colleagues in UNEP the road forward for the PEI for the next 5 years, and of course in close dialogue and consultation with our partners. This is not a standalone activity, kind of an island in an otherwise a sea of fragmented activities. There are clear links between the PEI and our work in following up on Rio+20 more broadly. The global program that we have in UNDP so that creates the basis for our policy advisory services in our mandated areas of work is a bedrock investment that we are making as UNDP to be able to continue to play a role in implementing and expanding the agenda of the Poverty-Environment Initiative. And this has been pointed out in a recent evaluation that has just been presented to our executive board. We hope that the next phase of the PEI will be focused on meeting implementation challenges, and that it can become indeed a key driver for how national development strategies can respond to sustainable development, to the development of, and hopefully by the 1st of January 2016, the implementation of sustainable, the next development agenda with sustainable development goals. Because I hope we will wake up in the morning on the 1st of January 2016 and will indeed have that new global compact for development for the next, whatever the case may be, 15, 20 years. Can't go anything worse than waking up on the 1st of January 2016 and that's gone. We will also hope that we can move beyond the policy sphere and seek to influence more so than we have already the budgetary and the financial issues relating to the investing in sustainable development activities, and how national institutions need to be at the forefront of all of that. And in this context, one big challenge we all have, but I think we should take it on, we should embrace this challenge, is moving beyond GDP as the kind of the default gold standard for how we measure progress. Because as long as that's the case, we are on the wrong track. And that has to change. That's also an outcome of Rio, but hopefully the Poverty-Environment Initiative can be one, there will be others, but it can be one instrument that we can coalesce around to help move beyond GDP, the beyond GDP agenda forward. And with that, I'll express first UNDP's sincere thanks to the group of donors, including Norway and Sweden, who have stayed with PEI for the last 5 years of this current phase. And I also look forward to continued engagement. We need you with us for the next phase. And indeed, with Norway and Sweden at this table, thank you very warmly for co-hosting this event and for the ongoing engagement in PEI. With that, I believe it's for me to introduce someone who doesn't need to be introduced at all, because you all know him very well. He's not in the room, but he will be greeting us on the screens. The Executive Director of UNEP, Steiner, who has a message for us.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First of all, thank you for letting me join by means of this video message on the occasion of this side event, for which I would also like to thank Norway and Sweden for having brought us together once again. What is perhaps one of the more exciting initiatives and also breakthrough stories of our partnership in the UN system, particularly between the United Nations Development Programme and UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme. We're about to embark on the next phase of the Poverty-Environment Initiative for the years 2013 to 2017. And in many respects, I think many of you who are at this event, but also at the review that took place of PEI last year, we all concluded that not only was this initiative on the right track, but it also addressed many of the objectives which became part of the narrative of the Rio Plus 20 conference. Whether it is the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, whether it is the integration and mainstreaming of environmental issues in the context of poverty eradication and economic development paths, whether it is the ability of the UN family to work as one, whether it is the ability also of the international system to provide countries with concrete and practical support and tools and capacity building in the context of green economy, and the opportunities that this provides for addressing multiple objectives in the sustainable development process. I personally have always been convinced that poverty eradication without a clear understanding of how particularly the poor rely in rural economies, but also often still in urban areas, on natural resources, on that natural capital which underpins often the economy and the livelihoods of the poor, is central to trying to talk about sustainable development and poverty eradication in the 21st century. Indeed, we know today that very often that natural system on which poor communities and the rural economy rely are sometimes the last safety net that people have at their disposal. But that cannot be the whole answer to the question of environment, development and economy. Indeed, we must begin to understand, as we have often done over the last few years, that it is in the natural capital, whether it is land, soil, forest, biodiversity, water, wildlife, or indeed the productive potential that is associated with using these resources, that we have one of the most significant opportunities for also building the pathways out of poverty. It is not only about poverty alleviation, it is about poverty reduction, it is about creating opportunities for livelihoods, and as we have also learned in our work, very often avoiding the loss of livelihoods because we destroy the very natural resources in the name of development at times that the poor rely on. Trying to achieve this is not only a matter of economic and development planning, it is not only a matter of environmental policy and regulatory frameworks, it is indeed about how national and macroeconomic policies can begin to take account of the value of these resources to the poor and in the broader context also to the development of whole nations and economies. It is here that the focus of the Poverty Environment Initiative and the coming together of UNDP and UNEP, I think, have yielded real benefits. We see that because the demand for support from PEI has now risen to 50 countries in 4 regions across the world. Clearly that is testimony to being able to provide something that countries not only want and need, but have also been able to utilize. The focus on particularly trying to look at planning frameworks, budgetary allocations and macroeconomic policies has in a sense created the opportunity for bringing the knowledge we have today about environment, natural resources, ecosystem management, climate change, and also issues that often threaten the health of citizens, for instance chemicals, which on the other hand are part of the opportunity of intensifying agricultural production, have to be part of a broader approach to development. I think the Poverty Environment Initiative, and I hope many of you will agree with us, is an example that has allowed us to not only bring different communities and constituencies together, but also to overcome the notion that it is the environment ministers who need to take care of this issue. The contrary argument being that environment ministers are too weak, and it is finance and planning and economics ministries that are at the heart of trying to make these transitions happen. It is our perspective from the UNEP side, but I'm sure also from our colleagues in UNDP, that it is not an either-or. It is about empowering environment ministries with the evidence that can in turn also assist them in trying to work with economics, planning and finance ministries to make the kinds of budgetary allocations, investments and also policy frameworks that allow environmental resources to be part of the foundation for an overall integrated poverty reduction strategy. Let me end by also saying that I believe this is a wonderful example of how UNDP and UNEP have combined their respective strengths and also networks and capacities across the globe. Our partnerships at country levels and also in the context of the United Nations Development Assistance Frameworks have demonstrated that this joint delivery mechanism, this joint staff, a joint secretariat and joint financing has really delivered on the promises that we made a few years ago when we embarked on this journey. But let me also take this opportunity and thank our partners, in particular our financial supporters and contributors, because without your confidence and also to a certain extent trust in this experiment, we would not have been able to develop this program. And I do have to look at the list for this because there are many of you, and that in itself I think is testimony to the Poverty and Environment Initiative's success in having gained the confidence of more and more countries. In particular, let me mention Belgium, Denmark, Germany, Ireland, Norway, Spain, Sweden, the United Kingdom, the US, and also the European Commission. All of you have over the past few years in one form or another contributed to our ability to try and make something that we often discuss at World Summits such as Rio Plus 20 in theory become practice in the multilateral system, and more importantly in terms of support at national and country level. For that we are very grateful, and we hope that you will continue to walk with us as we develop to roll out this Poverty Environment Initiative to more countries across more regions over the coming 4 years. Thank you. And to our colleagues in UNDP, I wish you also a very successful executive board meeting, which I know is also happening this week. Thank you and goodbye from Nairobi.
Okay. Thank you very much to Martin Steiner from UNEP for that message.
And yes, we do in UNDP agree. That is not either or, by the way, between Ministries of Finance and Planning and Ministries of Environment, and for that matter, others as well. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce I'll introduce you one by one as you speak, the panelists for this discussion. And first out will be Dr. Shamsul Alam, Planning Commission of Bangladesh. Dr. Alam is a member of the Planning Commission in charge of macroeconomics. He's also a professor of agricultural economics. And his team at the Planning Commission has been leading the PEI in Bangladesh, where the initiative is known as the Poverty Environment Climate Mainstreaming Project.
Thank you, Chair, and distinguished board members, UNDP board members, and other luminaries attending this session. I'll have a very quick rundown of the thing what we have achieved working with this UNDP, UNEP, and PEI project in Bangladesh for last 3 years. The division I represent, actually is responsible of preparing medium-term and long-term plans for the country. So with this project, I should say we are immensely benefited to reflect many ideas on the plan documents, particularly our 6-5 plan, which is in vogue now, right now. We have a perspective plan, which is a long-term plan up to 2021, and we prepared in a sustainable development strategy for Bangladesh, where actually got many input from this project. In brief, I can say you. In the first slide, very quickly I say, Bangladesh is the largest country in the world, having very highly densely populated country, which has high exposure to floods, cyclones, salinity, drought, landslide, and high susceptibility to earthquake and sea level rise. And just 2 events I refer here. We had 2 big cyclones in Bangladesh. One is in 2007, other one in 2009. The 2007, which is called Shidul in our country, it was named that way. Actually, we incurred loss of 3.7% of our GDP in one incident. And the Aida, the other cyclone named, which happened in 2009, that was 0.31% of total GDP of the country. So anyway, what I want to say, actually, we are really vulnerable to cyclones and environmental hazards, I should say. And in the plan, actually, our sixth plan is from 2011 to 2015, where we expected to have average growth rate of 7.3%, which is a bit high in terms of our past history, but we estimated that kind of ambitious growth rate. And how we actually created nexus of this poverty and climate issues with our national plans. I just refer some of the plans that we actually took account of, reflecting the PI lessons there. The one is the six-fiber plan, as I already told. The perspective plan is the long-term plan that have a clear experiences there we actually took from PEI and UNEP initiative, UNDP initiative. Then I already said that we have a national sustainable development strategy. For the international commitment to prepare, Bangladesh prepared it. My division actually prepared this. There also actually we got very important lessons from this project. So the project is not for long we have. In the last 3 years we have had this project. I should say this is actually just a start of the project, which is again going to be completed by this September this year. And we are going to plan a 50 to 100 years an indicative plan for Bangladesh, strategic plan actually concerning environment, natural resources, agriculture, and livelihood, and all social, environmental, and economic aspects. We are going to prepare a Bangladesh, we call it Bangladesh Delta Plan, with the help of actually Netherlands. So there it was also, I think, reflected correctly if you see the document, the other documents, and we have the concept paper for this Bangladesh Delta Plan. And we also prepared post-2015 development agenda from Bangladesh to submit it to UN to consider in the next course of action to develop post-2015 era development agenda. They are also actually reflected as much as well. We developed 2-3 goals based on this to attain sustainability for development, to make the development sustainable and stable. And this is the national plans. Actually, we have a big role of government investment in Bangladesh. Though it's declining every year, the private sector is coming up with aggregate investment. But even then, government has a big role, creating infrastructure, creating human resources. So each year, based on the 5-year plan, each year we actually prepare ADP, we call annual development plan, based on the 6th plan. In ADP, we have a format how to design a project, particularly when government develops a project for implementation. So in ADP, we actually we revised it based on some indicator developed in this PTCM project, called it Poverty-Environment Initiative project, that I already told, supported by UNDP-UNEP and PEI. So that's the big, I should say, achievement of this project. We developed a project pro forma, how to consider environmental things, how to address environmental sensitivities. But I must tell you, our total budget, which is around 90% of gross domestic product in our country, only 6 to 7% is actually expanded this climate sensitive, which is very low, I should say. Our poverty sensitiveness is 52% of the spending, but climate public expenditure sensitivity is very low here. What I want to say, we have to go long way with these issues, particularly environmental issues, sustainability issues. And in the last slide, I want to say we need benchmark for different indicators on environment. Actually, we do not have this kind of thing for proper monitoring and evaluation. We need to have benchmark for different indicators on environmental, climate change, and disaster and gender issues are critical for mainstreaming and post-family progress monitoring. Still, we have around 1,000 days for monitoring MDGs. We produce so far 6 progress reports from Bangladesh on MDGs. Though MDGs is yet unfinished, and we have achieved a lot with MDG, and there are remaining some targets yet to be fulfilled. And in particular, good seven sustainable environment, we are lagging in many ways, if I want to say briefly. Anyway, government of Bangladesh led process and holistic approach is critically helpful to mainstream the poverty, environment, climate, disaster issues into the whole of government mechanism. It should be actually culture of, to consider all these things. Practice should be a culture. So, partnership across government, Bangladesh agencies needed, particularly what my chair said before finance, environment, I should say local government also, agriculture ministry, water resource ministry, these ministries we have in Bangladesh. So we think all this should be actually streamlined together to have a coordinated approach, energy, power, transport, even. So we should mainstream all these ministries together to have a actual sustainability approach for development. Institutional capacity is important for sustainability of water, environment, climate mainstream, including private sector engagement. We have not gone much with the private sector yet because our project is only at the initial stage. We train many of the professionals who are involved with making projects plan. So that much we achieve with this project. And the next issue of resilience is critical in post-MDG framework. Targets and indicators where urbanization is a key process to be considered for building resilience. So we are way on, achieving so many things we achieved, but I should say commendable, but this is just initial taking off. We should go long to have a sustainable development and to eradicate poverty in Bangladesh. Thank you very much for allowing me speaking. I feel honored and privileged to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alam. And it's, we really get a sense, I think, of the extent to which really bringing together the economic and the environmental agendas is top priority for a country like Bangladesh. I now will turn to Mr. Alex Belisa. Ms. Belisa is the coordinator of the National Environment and Climate Fund in Rwanda. And this is a cross-sectoral financing mechanism to achieve sustainable development objectives in terms of environmental sustainability, climate resilience, green economic growth. So this is cutting-edge stuff. Your host, you play a key role in deepening and sustaining the achievements of the PEI in Rwanda through the allocation of resources, financial resources, to implement poverty and environment-related objectives. So please have a go.
Thank you, Chairman, distinguished audience in your respective capacities. I'm honored to be speaking to you about Rwanda's experience with respect to PEI and its implementation at the country level. Country context, I will not belabor that point. It's out there on the internet. But suffice it to say that Rwanda is one of the highest populated countries in Africa, if not the highest, with an average of around 385 people per square kilometer. So, and the other point I would want to make in that context is the fact that we are heavily dependent on subsistence agriculture. I think that rings true for today's message in terms of convergence of environment and poverty. The story of PEI and Rwanda dates back to around 2005. But just before that, environment was something that was not very much taken into account in the development debate. It was kind of on the surface in that our PRSP1, which started in 2005, rather 2001, had environment as a cross-cutting issue. And what that meant, at least from our experience, is that environment belonged to everybody, but it did not actually be owned by anybody. So what is interesting to note here and defining is that when the PI was being formulated at the national level, the first focus was on how do we position environment in the development debate at the national level. And that is when we came up with the fact that environment had to be a sectoral issue as well as a cross-cutting issue. That was very defining for us and sets the stage of the whole debate of what PEI managed to do at the council level in terms of influencing the convergence of the P and E nexus. You will bear with me when I use acronyms. I believe I'm talking to the compartment already. So even then, when the environment was being put on the agenda from a cross-sectoral as well as a sectoral standpoint, there were serious issues in how this environment would be taken into account in the development process, in the development of strategies, the development of action plans within different ministries. So it was a serious challenge to PEI, to the forerunners of PEI implementation at the country level, to be able to contend with how do we link poverty and environment, but most importantly, how do those linkages, what implications do those linkages have for development? And that challenge was taken seriously, and at the time, there was a menu of approaches that PEI had identified, and one of which was studies. So the first thing that we did was conduct studies to be able to address the question of why. Why does environment matter in the first place? That was still very much up for debate. Secondly, how does this actually address poverty? And the linkage itself was very important. But what was even obvious is that most people at the country level, particularly the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, wanted to know what implications does poverty, environment, or even the linkage have for economic development. And one study that seemed to open up the way for taking the nexus seriously was the economic analysis itself. There is a big wetland which has two hydropower stations that supplied the whole of the city, the biggest city there, Kigali, for those who don't know it, with the electricity. And around 2004, apparently there was a shortfall in electric supply. So we had serious blackouts. Debate was going on that the encroachment of agricultural activities in this wetland was actually impacting the availability of electricity. It had dropped to about half the capacity. And the question, I mean, it is very obvious the electricity, implications of electricity supply for not only lighting and heating, but also for industrial growth, which Rwanda was focusing on. So this was very defining in terms of trying to bring together the implications of poverty and environment, but beyond that, on the potential for addressing economic opportunities that we were seeking at the time. The other thing, very quickly, was the integrated ecosystem assessment, which was very defining at the subnational level in terms of linking poverty issues, the availability and the access to water, food security, all these things. The study was conducted in an area where there was diminishing levels, very rapid diminishing levels of food security, specifically. And so it was it became imperative that demonstrating the poverty environment connection or the nexus as we call it, to local level food security and water availability was very defining. So the studies, this is to underline the fact that the why question in terms of how poverty environment nexus was very relevant to our development came through those studies, and beyond that, the ability to actually engage stakeholders to be able to understand these linkages. So that was the next step, where we had to come up with the tools and engage sectors, different sectors, the agriculture, the infrastructure, the energy, with those results well packaged through policy briefs. The third thing was the strategic capacity building as the way towards institutionalization of the PE linkages within the different sectoral plans and programs. So it became important that different sectors, the agriculture, how do you engage them to understand that they needed to do things like environmental impact assessment so that they can have environmental management plans for agriculture in wetlands. This came to bear, of course, through not only the studies, but the strategic engagement and building the capacity. One of the strategies that we used was actually introducing internship programs where people would come from the environment ministry to go and work on a day-to-day basis with the agriculture to be able to internalize and institutionalize these concepts. And then, so the question of why was being answered, the question of what, and the elements of how in terms of engagement. But there was the bigger how. Okay, so we understand this. We understand PE is important and the linkages. We understand that you have brought interns to get us to understand what this all means towards our performance and sector-specific performance and productivity. But the question is, how are we going to do it in a bigger picture? Where are the finances? And that is where the Fund for Environment and Climate Change came in. So we were talking about the fact that we needed financing beyond what there are two-pronged strategies. One was to influence the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning to be able to allocate the resources towards that. But we quickly realized that even those resources, once they went to the agriculture and the energy, they were not being spent on the sustainability aspects. One of the things that introduction of financing, sustainable financing, why it became imperative was the fact that there needed to be a mechanism of not only mobilizing resources from both domestic and international climate finance, but these financing had to be managed in a way that they addressed the core sustainability issues in other sectors, which is why we call it the cross-sector sustainable financing mechanism in the name of Environment and Climate Change Fund. So this dedicated financing is supposed to manage climate and environment and green growth financing at the national level to be able to mobilize resources, disperse them and channel them to where they are going to be most effective in terms of ensuring that sustainability is an integral part of the performance in different sectors. All these issues, of course, could only be taken on through effective policy advocacy. And that was what was the defining aspect for PEI's intervention. PEI supported the proposal of how this national fund could be designed at the national level to be able to focus on the key issues, the poverty environment nexus. But beyond that, it was strategic in terms of identifying champions through the Ministry of Finance and Environment and different other sectors like agriculture and energy that are key to sustainability. So this policy advocacy, including engaging the parliament themselves, was very important. one of the key instruments for effective policy advocacy was application of what in Uganda we call the homegrown solutions. Chairman talked about the integrated solutions. We said short of coming up with the visible, practical demonstrations at the local level, it was going to be either hard or unattainable to be able to demonstrate that actually this integrated approach with the focus to PE linkages was going to be very difficult and without having the visible practical demonstration or pilot activities at the local level. And this is exactly what we did through a demonstration project, taking into account integration, looking into how actually the poor can capitalize on poverty environment linkages to, on an integrated level to be able to begin addressing the poverty. And this demonstration project has been featured in different areas like the OECD meetings. UNEP has a whole lot of data on that, and it was exactly instrumental. What are the challenges? Very quickly. Sectors such as agriculture and infrastructure have been very slow. Naturally, particularly the infrastructure, the things to do with the environmental impact assessment and things like that. Even projects that are undertaken by World Bank, where there is a proportion of money dedicated to EIA, it becomes very difficult for them to be able to implement these things. Private sector has been, as they call it, a pain in the back. It's not ready to seize the opportunities, although I must say that with the introduction of this fund, one of the focus areas is the private sector. How do we effectively engage the private sector to be able to move towards sustainability? And we can see that the future looks much brighter than the past. In the initial stages, we actually wanted this fund to be taken on by the Ministry of Finance because it's the coordinating ministry. But they were shy because of the technical ability to be able to disseminate it. But with the operationalization and the fact that funds are flowing in, we are seeing much more interest, which of course paints another picture that they didn't want to get an empty fund, and the environment, knowing its comparative advantage, had much more spine to be able to jump into the mud, so to speak. So integration of poverty environment initiatives in the performance contract. In Rwanda, at the district level, we have what we call performance contracts, which reinforces the ownership and the ability for local subnational institutions to be able to deliver on development. Something very important, but in terms of poverty environment nexus, it has been a hard road. We have a demonstration as well for poverty environment indicators, but taking them on has been somewhat slow. In terms of where we are going, of course we are mobilizing resources thanks to DFID. We have got the initial seed funding of about $36 million in the fund. We are ready to call for proposals right now. This fund caters for NGOs, private sector. There is a proportion of about at least 20% must go to the private sector, as I've talked about in terms of ensuring that we kind of provide incentives for them to move towards sustainability. We have what we call the Green Growth and Climate Resilience Strategy, which actually feeds into the medium-term strategy, our kind of PRSP called Economic Development and Poverty Reduction Strategy, the second generation. And one thing that speaks volumes about the efforts that have been influenced by PEI in the first phase is that they actually call it a green medium strategy, to the extent that one of the priority areas is to develop a pilot green city. Mind you, we have a pilot green village which is where these concepts are being reported from, which was also undertaken and supported by PEI. Capacity building, particularly at the national level, is still a problem, and both from the PEI standpoint and from the fund standpoint, there is a robust focus on ensuring that capacity at the national level, which is where implementation takes place, where the fertilization of these homegrown solutions takes place, to be able to be scaled up, has the potential to survive, and that is why the two initiatives, both the PEI and the specific fund itself, are focused on enhancing capacity at the national level. All this engaging with the partners, UNDP right now, as a result of the work and achievements that have been made at the national level in terms of poverty environment nexus, has come up actually with a poverty environment program. That's what the country office has right now, with a dedicated support to PEI to continue doing what they have been doing for the medium-term strategy, which is 2013 to 2017. So we are seeing some kind of parallels with what we have been going through this week. It's all pleasing. Yes, there are challenges, but we are not shying away from this because we have seen the opportunities that this program contains at the national level. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Melissa, for this tour of the real world. It's really wonderful to see that when we talk poverty and environment, it's not academic, it's not pious advocacy, it's real hard work that is happening at an unprecedented scale in a growing number of countries around the world, in Bangladesh, and in Rwanda, and many other places. So it was great to get these very thorough presentations from both of you. It means we have a little bit less time for the next speakers, and hopefully for also some time for talking the floor at the end. So when I now turn to the development partners from the north, from Sweden and Norway, I'll ask you to bear with me and maybe limit yourselves to just a few minutes, so that we can then open it up for questions and discussion. I'll first ask Magnus Lennartsson, Minister at the Permanent Mission of Sweden, to speak. He has done many other things before he entered his current post. He has, among other things, been Minister Deputy Chief of Mission at the Swedish Embassy in Tokyo. He's also been back here in New York earlier and served as delegate of Sweden to the Security Council, and been in Beijing and I'm sure many other places. You have the floor.
I'm not losing any more time on that. But I just want to say that as a long-standing supporter of the UNDP-UNEP Initiative, it's really delighted to host this side event. We think that PEI has been an innovative initiative in mainstream integrated approaches to poverty and environment in international policy and budgetary processes. And the success, we think, is manifested by the big demand for its services and by the increasing number of governments and UNDP country offices applying this PEI programmatic model. We often cite the PEI as one of the best examples of how the UN agencies can work together in partnership. It is a working example of one UN. We see it as a model for how UNEP, as a non-resident agency, can work operationally through UNDP at the country level, with both organizations contributing on the basis of their competitive advantages. We've also noted that the PEI is having a positive impact between and within the respective organizations through increased cross-practice and intra-divisional collaboration, both at the country, regional, and HQ levels. What also makes PEI very attractive to us is that it serves as a catalyst for broader institutional collaboration at the country level. For example, through the application of tools such as economic assessments, public expenditure reviews, the PEI has positively influenced the the approaches of ministries of finance, planning, and environment, and sector agencies towards greater integration of key poverty and environment linkages. This facilitates integration of environment objectives beyond the isolated positions they sometimes have in broad development plans. In other words, PEI provides practical approaches to sustainable development. Bilateral donors and the PEI have coordinated support through the scaling up of these piloted projects in selected areas. In the case of Sweden, in Rwanda, for example, SIDA has learned about the PEI work in one of the districts, Gikumbi, and there we have seen PEI working on integrated environmental protection and development model, a village which is held up as a model for emerging resettlement plan in Rwanda's integrated development program. And the rationale for our support to decide to support this scaling up was based on our assessment that this would lead to great cost effectiveness when it comes to and also creating clear linkages between integrated environment management and improved livelihoods. So simply put, this is seen as an effective and policy relevant approach to poverty reduction. SIDA, in collaboration with the government of Rwanda, drew on best practices from the Rwanda demonstration project and scaled up the work and replicated it in other districts. We believe that in the aftermath of Rio +20 and looking forward to the post-2015 development agenda, the current process to develop SDGs, etc., PEI is much more relevant than ever. Why? Because it brings together the three pillars of sustainable development. It also helps government in gaining greater understanding of the relevance and contribution to environment, sustainable natural resource management, sustainable ecosystem services management, and social and human well-being. As Olaf said earlier, the PEI and the lessons learned we have gained from it, we think will be great importance in developing the post-2015 development agenda. Finally, while there are successes, there's also a need to ensure that we learn from the lessons and that we, with the first phase of this initiative, we think that it's important for UNDP and UNEP, well before 2017, to mainstream methods and lessons learned from PEI and making it an integrated element in the regular program of work of the two organizations. Earlier evaluations have shown that UNDP also needs to overcome functional silos. This is a long-standing challenge. We're working on this. I think as a concluding question, since this side event is organized in connection with the UNDP Executive Board Annual Session, how can this initiative serve as a role model within UNDP itself in this sense of creating cross-functional connections in the organization? So, thank you for inviting us to participate in this side event.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And next, Bette Herstad. She's a policy director in the NORAD's Department of Climate, Energy, and Environment. And Bjørn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen. It's been interesting to listen to my fellow panelists and to get some concrete experiences from the ground. I think that's what we quite often need in this international sphere. I'm trying to shorten my introduction a little bit, but I would think it's quite important that we look at the concrete examples from a variety of countries, and that this shows that environmental sound management is vital for long-term economic progress and poverty reduction. Health ecosystems are vital for improving the health, resilience to climate change and environmental risks. economic development and livelihood opportunities for the poor. We would say that achieving the Millennium Development Goals is not possible without healthy systems. That said, we are still struggling with the dichotomy of environment and development. Traditionally, we know that most countries' growth and development aspirations have been met through our exploitation of natural resources, such as water, forest, and land. And we also got some experiences of that today. Environment considerations are still viewed by many as obstacles to development and not as a basis on which we all sustainable development has to be built. And I think it's quite important, even in this room of friends, that we take that into account, that it's not everybody's part. On the positive side, green growth and green economy programs are beginning to flourish. So are the knowledge, the experience, and the understanding across sectors. I would use the opportunity to refer to a global conference on ecology, economy, for sustainable development, for sustainable society that we hosted in Norway just 2 weeks ago, where we had 350 countries present and represented with the Ministers of Finance and the Ministers of Environment. The conference concluded by delivering an appeal to seize the moment of opportunities in 4 areas. To understand the interplay between ecology, economy, and society, which I think we all can agree upon. To invest in biodiversity for human well-being and development. To recognize and measure the true value of biodiversity. And to align policies, incentives, and business within safe ecological limits. The challenge for all the participants and for us here is, of course, to follow up with these aspirations together with all the challenging facing national governments and to be concrete at the national and local level. In this regard, I would say that PAY is a very good example of concrete implementation of fruitful green growth in low-income countries. It has delivered results on the ground. According to external evaluations, PAY has managed to develop a practical approach for policymakers and practitioners to mainstream poverty and the environment, as we have heard here today from several sources. Phase 2 of PAY emphasizes the importance of green economy being inclusive and fruitful. This is very much in line with Norway's priority of promoting equitable sharing of wealth in our development cooperation, as expressed in our latest government white paper that we are presenting to our parliament just these days. Green development is not more costly compared to business as usual if all costs are considered and the environmental services from natural capital are valued and taken into account. I think we can all agree on that in this room. PAY has demonstrated that it's true. And that is one of the reasons why, or some of the reasons why Norway has been supporting PAY since 2004, and we are considering to support the new phase also after 2013. Green economy requires participation and ownership at all levels and in all countries. To ensure the necessary shift towards a green and just economy is not in any way an isolated exercise. This is not the kind of task that concerns only some people and some sectors in some countries. Norway sees inclusive green economy as a vital path towards sustainable development, and we address the important issue about how inclusion growth can be achieved in practice at national level. And we will support the capacity to do so through different channels. In Norway, we also work in this regard. We have established a national commission on valuing ecosystem services, and they are to deliver a report just this month. The Commission is looking at how we can strengthen our knowledge of nature's value and take this into account in our decisions, national accounting and economic transitions for our future. We know that similar assessments based on the so-called TEEB reports, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, are made in Sweden, India and Brazil, among others. Together with the pay experiences, these may contribute to the international processes of the post-2015, the SDGs, and the climate change agenda. We also would like to put the line together between the initiative of pay and our forest program, forest initiative. I'm trying to be very fast and then I get a bit abrupt here. I would also use this opportunity to point to the women's rights and gender equality that are priorities of Norway's development agenda. Norway welcomed the increased focus on gender in the new phase of the initiative, and we see gender-related activities as important in terms of empowering women, reducing their vulnerability, ensuring that their concerns are reflected within development plans and programs, and promoting gender equality. Yes, fine. Norway looks forward to seeing a stronger involvement of UNDP on these issues in line with the UNDP strategy. Pay is a joint initiative between UNDP and UNEP, and evaluations show that this is one of the best examples of how the two UN agencies can work in partnership. And as my Swedish colleague said, we would like it to be replicated by the UN family. Pay is in line with a highly prioritized one UN approach, and it also highlights how pooling resources and capacities provide better results than what can be achieved independently. We see the joint programming and budgeting as the key element of PAY's success. We do look forward to the implementation of the next phase of PAY, strengthening national governments' exchange of experiences across national boundaries, and feeding these lessons learned into the international processes that will guide the work for poverty eradication and inclusive growth in our century. Last but not least, in our opinion, UNEP and UNDP should strengthen pay as a priority in the future programs and strategic plans. Mainstreaming of poverty and environment nexus is needed both in national government and in international institutions such as UNEP and UNDP, as sharing of experiences, both success stories and failure, is important in this regard. Thank you.
With your indulgence, we might go over a few minutes in order to be able to take some comments and questions from the floor. And I will, of course, respond to the polite question from our colleague from Sweden. But let me first now give the opportunity for anyone who might like to give a question.
My name is Andrea Prenti. I'm with. Okay. Hi, I'm Andrea Prenti. I'm with the Unitarian Universalist United Nations office. A few of you have mentioned alternative indicators of measuring welfare. So instead of GDP, a few of you have mentioned different indicators of welfare. Are these welfare indicators being developed, and are there any that you can name and sort of describe?
Let's take a couple others.
to that specific question, there's a lot of work ongoing on the issue of beyond GDP. Many very important initiatives. Of course, there is the existing arsenal of measurements that are relevant, including UNDP's own Human Development Index, which is in very broad use, but also, of course, many others. The ecological footprint is one. It's called the Global Progress Index, and there is the work under the auspices of OECD on well-being, and you have the Gross National Happiness work led by Bhutan and a few others, and the Statistical Commission of the UN is, of course, involved, and by the way, the World Bank, of course, with for instance, the natural capital and the national accounts around that, the waves. So there's a lot underway, and with the Rio outcome, there is an expectation of the UN Statistical Commission to oversee some work that will hopefully bring things together and help advance this measurement agenda. And while we don't see PEI as a place to actually develop new measurements, it's a very good arena for working on the capacity development side when it comes to measurements and testing things out. And that's the kind of function we believe this initiative can where we can contribute to moving this agenda forward. We have Isola Kemp here, who is the director of the Poverty-Environment Facility in Nairobi, which is this joint venture that helps bring keep things together between our two agencies, and of course George Buma as well, who is in charge of the Poverty-Environment Interface from UNDP side. And of course I'd like to invite you as well if there's anything you'd like to say in 30 seconds. Interview. Now is your chance.
So just briefly, in response to your question also, UNEP also launched during Rio the National Wealth Index, and you said, describe a little bit what that entails. It's basically a way of trying to measure not only economic wealth, but also human resources in the country and natural resources in the country. And then kind of say, if you take all of this together, what kind of investment would you need to make sure that this is fully utilized and is growing in the future? So we're not only talking about economic assets, but really a more holistic way of saying, what are tactic assets and how can you make sure to strengthen these?
Thank you. And let me just very quickly, because I understand there's a new event taking place in this room very, very shortly. Back to you, Magnus, when it comes to how we, as UNDP, see this initiative when it comes to the future agenda of bringing, as UNDP, contributing to bringing more integration and policy agendas together by walking the talk. And what I can say is that luckily this is not the only example of fruitful collaboration across the different thematic areas of work in UNDP. So there's quite a lot to build on, where we look at the interface of local development, local governance work, the interface of the work around HIV/AIDS and human rights, climate change and anti-corruption, UN Red, of course, which has the interagency dimension with FAO and UNEP at the core, but also where our colleagues in democratic governance are very strongly engaged, working with our climate and forest experts in relation to the three agencies involved. And I would highlight the post-2015 team that we have established for UNDP to play its role in moving that whole agenda forward. That definitely requires what we call a cross-practice approach, and that is thoroughly instituted in how we work. But that said, you're right, we need to take this to the next level, and I would say that the PEI, along with some of these other examples that I just highlighted, it is precisely the role model at the core of what we're trying to achieve within a strategic plan. So already when you read the shift that we are implying in our strategic plan towards
more issues-oriented approach and working in development solutions teams. There you have it. That is, in a sense, in taking the PI example and making it more so than in the past the way it was. So with that, I think we're at the end. I would thank the panelists particularly and all of you for coming, and please follow this initiative as it moves forward and give it support. I think we're on to something very, very important.